Long before Albert Pujols made his mark as one of the greatest to ever take the court, he had to prove himself. After just one season in the minors, he was invited to spring training in 2001, and despite playing on a loaded Cardinals team, he forced his way onto the team and changed the franchise. So, let's look back at it.
Totally sports-esque. Major League.
3 years after immigrating from the Dominican Republic, Albert Pujols finished his only season at Maple Woods Community College in Missouri, where he played shortstop and hit a casual .461 with 22 home runs. Only a few teams were interested in drafting him. The concerns were his build, where he would play, and concerns of his actual age. And looking at a picture of him in high school, it's easy to see where that concern comes from. In the 1999 draft, it wasn't until the 13th round that Pujols was drafted. The team with the first pick of the round was the Tampa Bay Devil Rays, and scout Fernando Arango was begging them to draft Pujols. Instead, they drafted Jason Pruitt, who never made it to the majors. The pick crushed Arango, so much so that he quit his role as a scout. And 17 picks later, the St. Louis Cardinals took Albert Pujols with the 402nd pick, becoming maybe the greatest late-round pick in history. And he made his mark immediately. In the 2000 season, he played a majority of his games in Single-A Peoria, where he hit .324 with 17 home runs, 84 RBIs, and a .953 OPS in 109 games. He was named the MVP of the Midwest League, and after playing 21 games in High A, he joined the AAA Memphis Redbirds at the end of the season, where he hit .367 in the playoffs as he won the Pacific Coast League, and he won playoff MVP. So going into spring training in 2001, it wasn't like Pujols was some no-name player, although he went by a different name at the time.
Jose.
But going into spring training, Tony La Russa and the Cardinals weren't expecting any surprises as they felt their roster was set. They had their winningest season in 14 years and had veteran pitching in the likes of Jim Edmonds, Mets legend Bobby Bonilla, and Mark McGwire in what would be his final season. Tony La Russa jokingly told reporters that Pujols shouldn't make the club, but also said he didn't think Mark McGwire was going to make the club in 1987 when La Russa was managing the A's. But these were different situations. Mark McGwire was well known before 1987, mainly because of what he did in college, and he was a top 10 pick who spent half the season in AAA the year prior, so it wasn't too surprising when he made the opening day roster. But for Pujols, it appeared he still had a way to go. That is, until he started playing. Pujols hit a home run and a triple in the team's first inter-squad game, and by the end of February, talks were much more serious about bringing him up on opening day. In a way you can tell a player is different right away, La Russa was amazed by the pitches he would take and the way the ball would fly off his bat. La Russa began to play Pujols sparingly at the start of March, almost like he was fighting his feelings for him. He had no intentions to bring a 21-year-old with 1 year of minor league experience up, but eventually, everyone around him wanted to see him on opening day. On March 23rd, Pujols was hitting .351 with 8 extra base hits in the spring, and Tony La Russa was again asked about bringing him up. And he said, "What's the difference between reason and reality? The reality is that he's playing like hell. The reason is that he would probably continue to do so if you keep playing him. So the key is to quit playing him." Many were confused by what La Russa said, though it appeared he was somewhat joking. Either way, La Russa said he was leaning towards sending him down, then 2 days later, he hit a home run. Then GM Walt Jocketty announced that they would have a decision within the next day or two. Then something big happened. Bobby Bonilla pulled his hamstring, so he would not play on opening day, though he would receive pay for not playing, like he does every July 1st. Now the team had an excuse to bring Pujols up, and they did. La Russa and other members of the Cardinals management have gone on to say that they were going to bring him up regardless of the injury, and others have backed it up. But either way, Pujols was set to become the youngest player in the game and the first player ever born in the 1980s. In the beginning of spring training, Mark McGwire said he did not know who Pujols was, but by the end, he told Tony La Russa that not moving him up would be one of the worst moves of his career. Pujols was in the same lineup as McGwire on opening day in Colorado, playing left field, one of the many positions he would play that year. He would record his first hit that day, and would record his first home run 4 days later in Arizona. And when Bobby Bonilla came back, he was slugging .700, and there was no way they could send him back to the minors. He stayed, and would go on to have one of the greatest rookie seasons of all time. He became the first Cardinal rookie in 46 years to make the All-Star team, as he hit 21 home runs, drove in 66 runners, with a .323 average, and a .985 OPS at the All-Star break. He would go on to win the Silver Slugger at third base, finished 4th in MVP voting, and unanimously won the Rookie of the Year after setting an NL record with 130 RBIs, while becoming the 4th rookie to hit 30 home runs with a .300 average and 100 runs scored and 100 RBIs. He also had an OPS of 1.013 and an offensive WAR of 6.6. So La Russa's decision to bring him up after spring training was a lot better than his decision to come back to the White Sox. and that decision to bring him up in 2001 would have an effect on the league for years to come, as Albert Pujols went on to have one of the greatest careers in MLB history. And just for a what-if scenario, if Pujols would have even missed a few months playing in the minors, he may not have reached 700 home runs, which he did at the end of 2022. And it also makes you wonder if he would have passed Babe Ruth if he would have had those 100 extra games in 2020. But Albert Pujols' spring training in 2001 shows why spring training can be interesting. Obviously these games don't mean much at the end, but for guys that are trying to prove themselves, they are some of the most important games they'll ever play. An incredible showing in spring training can allow a player to force themselves onto the roster, but a lot of times, guys will come out of nowhere in spring training to put themselves on the roster, but ultimately end up phasing out a few weeks into the season, such as Jake Fox, who hit 10 home runs and had an OPS of 1.122 in spring training in 2011, which put him on pace to hit 60 home runs in the regular season, but he only ended up playing 27 games for the Orioles before being designated for assignment and never playing in the majors again. There was a similar situation just last year in St. Louis. Jordan Walker had a great spring, and his performance in the minors put him on the opening day roster at the age of 20. But he had some struggles that sent him back down at the end of April. It looks like he has a great future ahead of him, and I'm sure something like this will happen again this year, and will continue to happen. What Albert Pujols' spring training and rookie year really shows is how ready he was for the moment. Like Mickey Mantle in 1951, despite being thrown into a huge situation on a great team at a very young age, with expectations to replace one of the best players of all time, they both forced their way onto the roster and went on to have first ballot Hall of Fame careers. Albert Pujols showing up in the moment is an underrated part of his career. There's the added fact that he has the 13th highest win probability of all time, but there's forgotten moments, like the fact that the 9th inning rally in Game 6 of the 2011 World Series started with his double, and in 2022, there was the immense amount of pressure to get to 700. And in home runs 693 through 700, 5 of those 8 home runs were either game-tying or go-ahead home runs in the 6th inning or later. He's tied with Babe Ruth, Frank Robinson, Stan Musial, Mickey Mantle, and Jimmy Fox for second in walk-off home runs at 12, only one behind Jim Thome for first. Adding an NLCS MVP and being in the top 10 of a number of postseason categories, including being tied with Pete Rose for 4th in postseason win probability added, it's a pretty impressive clutch resume. And it all started with what he did in the spring of 2001. That made the decision to add him to the roster easy and left the other 29 teams who didn't select him as one of the first 401 picks bitter. And eventually made Brad Lidge wish Pujols stayed in the minors for his entire career.